Hi guys, my name is Corme, and this video is going to be my Resto Shaman raid guide for 9.1 Sanctum of Domination. In this video, we're going to go over all the basics, including Covenants, Soulbinds, Conduits, Talents, stats. Mostly I'm going to talk to you guys about how you can get your own stat weights and tools that you can use along with that. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about gameplay. We're mostly just going to go over kind of like the spell priority and what you want to make sure that you're using more than other spells. And I'll get into that a bit more later on in like later commentary videos. It's kind of hard to go into the details in this format, so I'm only going to go over the basics. Before we get into anything about Covenants, I do want to say that if you haven't made your Shaman yet, or you have the option, I highly suggest that you play a Goblin. Goblin Jump is just so good for getting around the map, and I also suggest that you go Alchemy because you can get an Alchemist Stone at 230 eye level right now. It is a blue. Sorry, I don't have it on right now. There it is. It is a blue, but it is really well budgeted, I think. The only things that are better are like a Mythic Changeling, Soul-Letting Ruby, a couple of the Mythic raid trinkets. The heroic ones aren't better, and then some of the hard modes have the best trinkets, although I think they're putting in a hotfix into one of those that might make that one even worse. Yep, so let's get into it, and let's start with Covenants. Okay, so for Covenants, the most common choice and the highest HPS choice you can make is Necrolord. It's what I plan to play for Prog myself. Necrolord gives you Primordial Wave, which basically means that every 45 seconds you can cast a healing wave that will also duplicate onto everyone that you already have a Riptide on. So it's a lot of healing. The next most popular choice is Venthyr. So Venthyr also lets you do some damage. So it gives you something called Chain Harvest. It's basically a glorified chain heal. It does a lot of healing. It's almost like it does too much, and I almost wish it was just like it did less and it had like a shorter CD or something, because most of the time what ends up happening with it is it just ends up doing a lot of overhealing. What is nice about it though is that it does do a lot of damage. So what we're looking at right now is, this is from Heroic Week when I'm recording this. We're looking at like who does the most healing with which covenant for Resto Shaman from all the logs from this week. We don't see the other covenants because less than 5% of all players are playing those covenants. Necrolord is doing the most healing, and then Venthyr is doing the second most. Well, they're the second highest represented, I should say. They're not necessarily doing the second highest healing right now. Okay, so looking at damage, Venthyr does a lot more damage than Necrolord does right now. So you should not sleep on doing damage as a healer. It's really important. You want to try and get as close to those holy paladins and discreet as you can. So if you want to do some more damage, then Venthyr is a good way to go, or if you just like Venthyr itself, like the gap between the two is not really that big. But like I said, I will be playing Necrolord myself, and I do suggest you play Necrolord. Something that like we don't really have good information on that I want to mention that could become possible is Kyrian Resto Shaman, because there is a new Covenant Lego coming out for it. That one is going to do a lot of damage. Like being Kyrian and running, like if you're Kyrian, you should definitely play the Covenant Lego. And running the Lego is probably like at least like a 200 single target DPS increase, even more if it's like a multi-target fight. So it's gonna be exciting to see how that does, and if anybody decides to play it in the coming weeks for Prog. Okay, so the next thing that I want to get into is Soulbind. Okay, so I want to start out by talking to you guys about Venthyr Soulbind. So I think there are two that are pretty good. The first one is Theotar, which is definitely like the higher HPS Soulbind, and the second is Draven, which is really good for survivability. So Theotar's first trait is Soothing Shade, which gives you a mastery proc, but you have to stay where it spawns. The first endurance conduit I usually take is Refreshing Waters, which increases your healing surge on yourself. Not everyone takes this. Some people would rather take the one that reduces your cooldown on Incarn, but I value just living more than having a shorter cooldown on my Incarn, so I like this one. And then your first potency, like your most important one, is always Swirling Currents. It's really strong. It increases your next 3 heals after you put down your Healing Stream Totem, or what's actually going to be your Cloudburst Totem, because you're most likely never going to be playing Healing Stream Totem in raid. And then Vital Acceleration increases your maximum health whenever you cast Earth Delay. This is like a whole like 1 minute defensive. It's super good, especially at the end of most fights when things are getting really hectic, to just have Earth Delay there. And then, oop, this is not the right potency. That is a elemental potency. Your second potency should be Heavy Rainfall, which increases the healing down every healing ray whenever you cast your Healing Tide Totem. So you want to make sure that whenever you cast your Healing Tide Totem, you already have a healing ray down if you're using this. And it lasts for 20 seconds, so it lasts longer than the Healing Tide Totem. So you want to make sure that you're refreshing it, of course. Token of Appreciation just basically puts a shield on whoever heals you. It's just like a bunch of free healing. It's pretty nice. you and your healers can just pass around shields. Lavish Harvest, so this is the conduit for being Venthyr. I don't really like it, like I said earlier. I think that my biggest experience with running Chain Harvest, granted every time when I've been Venthyr it's always been on farm, not on prog. It's just done a lot of overhealing, and this to me is just like, it's just a lot of overhealing, and the CDR on Chain Harvest I don't value that highly on prog in most situations because you want to be consistent with where you're using your abilities during prog. And so you can't like always plan on getting, oh, I'm gonna get like 3 stacks of CDR, 2 stacks of CDR. You just have to go with the most consistent like timings and stuff like that. So most of the time you don't always get to take advantage of the CDR if you're trying to be consistent with your pulls and stuff like that, which you should be doing. So you're not gonna get an extra cast most of the time. And then as far as going like left to right here, I think both these are good because this gives you avoidance and speed. And this one gives you the heal. Whenever you get your parasol from this trade up here, it'll heal you, and it gives you a 5% damage reduction. And so that's kind of mediocre because it's like dependent on like the proc, and you can get troll procs. The heal is not that much. The DR is good, but only for procs at the right time. But the main reason I go this way is because it's gonna be your first finesse conduit. And having the increased movement every single time you go Ghost Whip for the first few seconds is super, super strong. And getting another endurance conduit just isn't that great because there's not really that much else. And then the last trait is Party Favors, which you can get just free primary set every day. So Draven, it's gonna make me collect them all again. Draven is like all the same conduits that you slot in. It's just a difference in the traits you get. So this one, Service and Stone, the main takeaway is that whenever you're below 40% health, you take less damage. You get some movement speed. Hold Your Ground is super good if there's like really low movement on the fight, but you're trying to like live like big hits and stuff like that. It increases your healing if you stand still, and then also it increases your stamina by 10%. So 10% stamina and 4% increased healing, kind of large, Regenerated Stone Skin turns overhealing into a hot, and then the last trait here makes you do increased healing and reduces the damage you take again, so even more DR and even more healing increase for how many enemies they are. So depending on the fight, this will have different values and stuff like that, but single target not that much, but if there's like 3 targets, it could be pretty large. So yeah, I think you can kind of flex between these two depending on when you need them. I think like a good example would be like, I would have ran like Draven on like Stone Legion Generals last year because that fight's mostly just about surviving, and I would have like ran like Theotar for like healing like things like SLG and like Sardathris. Okay. Let's talk about the Necrolord Soulbinds. Okay, so for Necrolord, the only Soulbind I'm really going to recommend is Emeni. The other two might have a place sometimes, but I think Emeni is just really good, so I'm really only going to recommend her. The reason she's so good is because of her first trait, which is Lead by Example. Whenever you use P-Wave, you get primary stat, and then those around you get primary stat, and the more of your friends you get primary stat to, the more you get as well, which is really good. This trait just increases your health by 5% when you cast Fleshcraft. It's okay. Turns your fall damage into a shield. And then you only get 1 endurance conduit here, so the one I would pick is Vital Acceleration, because I think it's just so good at the end of a fight, like during a burn phase when things are like crazy. Bristletoes, useless. And then you're gonna take Tumbling Waves for Necrolord. It's much better than Lavish Harvesters, and it has a chance to reset your P-Wave. The only time this might not be, it isn't as ideal as the other two, is because this problem I talked about before with CDR on Chain Harvest also applies to this, where like maybe you get a second cast but you don't want to use it because you want to make sure that you have it at some later part of the fight, like you're going for consistency in your pull, so it might actually not be that useful, but it is still really nice for getting extra Lead by Example or primary stat kind of owns. The new trait is Resilient Stitching, which gives you a shield against magic damage. You just take some other finesse conduit, doesn't matter what it is. After the Thunderous Pause, they're all kind of okay. And the last trait, which I haven't gotten to test yet, is it's associated with your Fleshcraft, and it gives you like some passive like extra damage and healing. I'm not sure how great that's going to be, but we'll see. Okay, so now let's talk about what legendary you should run. Okay, so for legendary, Shamans have a few kind of like viable Legos, but I think there's one that is definitely king, and if you look at logs, it's definitely the Primal Tide core. So every 4 casts of Riptide, you also get another Riptide applied to another friendly target near your Riptide target. So this is especially good if you're playing Necrolord, because it means you're getting an extra cleave on your healing wave when you cast Primordial Wave. Even if you aren't playing Necrolord, there's honestly just nothing better. Unless maybe you're Kyrian, and then if you're Kyrian, you follow the Kyrian Covenant Lego. But if you're like Venthyr, I would definitely just make this. Don't make the Venthyr Covenant Legendary most likely, because it's just gonna add more overhealing. And then Night Fae, I think that one's like only good if you think you're gonna get like an extra like Healing Tide cast or something. And then other than that, these other Legos, like they look like they have so much potential, and I want them to have potential, but they're just not gonna live up to it, and it's kind of sad. So yeah, next thing I want to get into is talent. So this first row is probably the one that's like the hardest to kind of like decide between and kind of explain. So let's start with Unleash Life. Unleash Life is theoretically always the best choice. If you're always playing perfectly, Unleash Life is always going to do more healing than Torrent. We're not going to Undulation is not really like a free talent. It's always going to do more healing than Torrent. However, it's a bit harder to pull off. You will always see like Resto Shamans in like the top 10 world, like like the Limit Echo Shamans will always be playing Unleash Life, and then below that, once you start getting to like top 20 worlds, stuff like that, you'll see a lot more Shamans starting to reach for things like Torrent. So they're both really good. Like the differences like are not that huge. But if you're playing like really well, like Unleash Life is definitely like the better choice. However, I usually go for Torrent. I started out Castle Nather going Unleash Life, and by the end of it, I was all for Torrent, and I think I still am, except for on a couple fights. I really like Torrent, especially on fights where there's just like you're constantly healing. Those are fights I like Torrent. I like Unleash Life a little bit more on fights where it's a bit more bursty. The reason is because like you have a lot more like downtime, like prep time. You have like the globals to put in to get ready for the damage incoming. Whereas like if you're just like constantly feeling like you're behind and saving people's life, it's hard to find the time to press this global and feel like you're gonna get like the full value and save someone's life with it. But yeah, if you aren't super comfy, and even if you are comfy and you just don't like feel like playing it, I would just play Torrent. If you feel like really getting into it, then go ahead and play Unleash Life. Second row, Deluge. You read it, it sounds super cool, but yeah, you just don't play. You just play Echo of Elements. Spirit Wolf, Earth Grab, or Static Charge. Play whatever you want, but I usually play Spirit Wolf. This third row, all three of these are viable. It's going to depend on the fight, your raid. Your raid might want Ancestral Protection Totem. It's a super unique thing that Shamans can bring to a raid. Earthen Wall is like the single most efficient thing you as a Shaman can cast. Do beware though, if there's a lot of ticking damage, it can cause your whole raid to lag out and drop frames. Ancestral Vigor is super valuable for keeping people alive. This is like the talent that, like, especially if you're like spreading out, like this is a talent that like we ran on N'Zoth because there's a lot more stacking. On Denathras we ran Earthen Wall. It kind of depends on the fight which one is better, and also it depends if like there's ticking damage or just like big hits and stuff like that. A couple things to go into it. Next row, same thing. If your raid needs Windrush Totem, your raid leader will tell you you'll take this and you'll be sad. But if you don't have to take that, Graceful Spirit kind of owns. Also, if there's not a lot of movement, you could just take Nature's Guardian. It's some free pad healing and also just a nice safety net to stay alive. You just always take Cloudburst Totem, ignore these two, and then you're pretty much always going to take Wellspring. I don't know why I had High Tide picked. Pretty much always taking Wellspring. If you aren't familiar with Wellspring, I just put out a video going over all the stuff about Wellspring because it's a bit more than meets the eye when you read the tooltip. There could be some times where you run High Tide or Ascendance, but most likely you're just always going to be running Wellspring. Yeah, let's get into stats and other tools a little bit. Okay, so instead of giving you some generic cookie cutter stats that might not be right for you, I'm just going to show you how to get your own stat weights. So your stat weights as a healer are going to change like per fight, per pull, all that kind of stuff. But generally, they shouldn't fluctuate that much. So what you need to do is you just need to find a log. It doesn't matter if you killed the boss, you can use any single log. And then you need to just hit the log and you go over to a site called WoW Analyzer. It's completely free. Paste your log in. You click on yourself, and it's going to give you a whole bunch of information, like kind of like giving you tips and tricks and critiquing you and telling you where you can improve. But for this section of the video, we're just going to focus on the statistics it gives you. So this is for our heroic KT kill this week. So my crit was 0.39, my mastery was the same, my burst was a little bit lower, and my haste. So generally for Shaman, crit is always going to be your highest, and then you usually want like a minimum amount of mastery. So like last year it was like around like 400, and then you start going for burst. Just look at your stat weights, see how your stats fluctuate to like figure out how much like mastery you want, and then you can start going for burst. Although at the beginning you're just be going for eye level, you don't really get to choose your stats, but like for gems and stuff like that. Mastery is really good. Don't sleep on her. It's really good for prog. Like even if it's simming a bit lower than it is, I still like it just because it's giving you the healing when you need it the most, and that's like the most unique thing that the shaman brings is they're just there to clean up and make sure that you're not going to die. It's the best part about being a shaman. So getting these stat weights is nice, but even better than that is that you can click that nice convenient button there to open Questionably Epic. Questionably Epic is also another really good healing site for you to like compare your gear and stuff like that. You can use those stat weights to like compare gear. When you open your vault on Tuesday, you can just paste your SimC and it'll give you an idea of like what your best piece is gonna be. It's so nice if you haven't been using it. And then also you can click on trinkets, see what it is. I mentioned the alchemist stone to you guys earlier. You can see it right here, and like all like it's like color coded based on the eye level, and basically the only things that are better than it are like the 226 versions of these, some of the Harmon Tazavist trinkets, and some of the mythic raid trinkets. So I highly suggest again that you go and get that trinket. Okay. There's also a bunch of other tools on this site that you can use to just improve your healing. I highly like suggest that when you're on here you take the time to explore. Most of the stuff on here is really good. I talked to you guys a bit before about like you can look at like how much healing you're getting out of Unleashed Life versus like Torrent. Like if you try them on 2 different pulls, it can really help you like break it down and figure out like, am I getting a lot of good stuff out of like every Earthen Wall cast? Like here, this was like a waste of a cast by me. So I'm like, oh, I don't want to put it there anymore. I'm going to put it somewhere else. Things like that. Yeah. So the next thing I want to get into is like kind of like our spell priority / rotation, if you want to call it that. Okay, so these are the spells that you want to make sure that you're basically keeping on CD, or at least you have like one charge recharging all the time. The first one is Torrent. Torrent does so much healing, it's free, your tank is taking damage, just put a Torrent on them. Cloudburst, same thing. If you're gonna do some healing, might as well throw a Cloudburst down. Get some healing fed in there, of course making sure that it's going to be detonating at a good time for you. You don't want it to just go into more overhealing because then it was a waste of mana. Healing Rain, make sure you're always keeping Healing Rain down. It's like usually like the #1 like I don't want to say like mistake, but like easily improvable thing to improve your healing on a fight. It's making sure that you're always keeping Healing Rain down. Even I have trouble with it sometimes. Wellspring, you want to be getting as many uses as you can, but make sure that you're using them at good times. Like I said again, I have a whole video on it if you want to go watch that. Unleashed Life, make sure you use it as much as possible. If you are talented into it, you want to make sure you're getting the most use out of it. And then Earthen Wall, make sure you're putting it down at useful times and as much as possible. Yeah. And then we also have some filler spells. The most important one this tier is Healing Wave. So if you just get back to the game from BFA and you're confused why we're casting Healing Wave and not Chain Heal, they basically just reverse like their power levels. So Healing Wave owns, you just, whenever you don't have anything else to cast and you need to do healing, you should be just spamming like Healing Wave on people. Chain Heal, you don't really want to spam most of the time because like it doesn't do that much healing and it costs a lot of mana. There are a couple times though where I would recommend use it, and that would be like if everyone is above like 85% HP, but you need to like top your raid, that's a good time to do it because Healing Wave is just going to overheal. Also, everyone is like really low and there's like another hit coming or another tick of damage coming, and they just need like a little bump to live through that next tick. That's also a good time to use Chain Heal. Some Resto Shamans also like really recommend, like if you have the extra mana and you want to use like your Unleashed Life charge on Chain Heal and you don't have like a P-Wave use on, it's also a good choice to do it there. Healing Surge, it's an okay filler. It's just really mana inefficient for the most fight lengths for you to be spending that much mana, but it's a nice emergency heal. And then of course, if you don't need to be healing, you should be doing damage. Try and race and catch up to those Disc Priests and Holy Paladins as much as you physically can. Yeah, that's basically it. Like I said, if this didn't feel like that like in depth for you for like the actual gameplay, I'm going to be coming out with like commentary videos as we start prog this upcoming week once we get to some of the harder like fights where I talk to you guys about like Cloudburst and Wellspring and like healing tide times and stuff like that. Just in this format, it's hard for me to kind of explain it to you. I hope that you enjoyed the rest of this video, and I hope that you learned something. If you have any questions, you can always stop by my stream. I usually stream every day, or leave comments below and I'll try to answer them as best I can. Thank you so much for watching.